Alison, tell me, how did you get into this? How did you get into doing what you're doing? How did you get your business started? Tell me a little bit about your business.
I started working for trade magazines, first as an editor and then as a publisher. So working in the B2B environment where, a big part of my job was to write stories about people in the computer industry. So that's how I started. And then at some point I decided to flip to the other side of the desk and be the one pitching the stories and helping companies share their news with the trade press.
How have you seen your written content help your customers? You work totally with B2B at this point, correct?
I do work totally with B2B. Content makes an enormous difference. Most of the B2B customers I work with, in most B2B environments, they're a long sales cycle. They're selling something that's somewhat complicated, that there's a lot of moving pieces, there's a lot of decision points, there's a lot of influencers. So they need to have education before they'll make any purchase. Mm-hmm. And increasingly, buyers do their research online. Yeah. They look for information to help them make their decisions. So the content is what that's all about. And you're trying to find the best way to influence that buyer at every stage of the buying process and to make the content as relevant as possible and as available as possible to the right people.
Yeah, well, I was just actually checking some stats earlier. It goes right along with what you said. 47% of buyers viewed 3 to 5 pieces of content before engaging with the sales rep. So that's what you said plugs right into these stats that HubSpot provided. So it's actually that. It takes a while, and it is a long sales cycle for B2B. It's a little shorter, or it can be much shorter for B2C. It's a different kind of a scenario, but B2C, it's a long time before people make that decision. Has it helped grow the businesses of the companies you work with, Alison?
Oh, definitely. A lot of what we do is discover audience outlets and then try to match them up with our pieces of content and draw them through, the classic buying funnel. So where we may discover an audience, we may develop an email campaign to urge them to attend a client's webinar. If they attend the webinar, one of the things they receive is an ebook. And then once they go through the ebook, the sales rep has a really well-qualified lead to follow up on. It absolutely works. It makes a huge difference. You're delivering qualified, interested, engaged leads to your sales team to close.
Wow. So you had mentioned ebook earlier and the whole sales funnel. What other types of writing can people expect from like a content creator?
There are so many different ways to develop content, and we are huge fans of, once you have an idea or a theme or a resource, to try to find as many ways to use it as possible. One of the best ways is to get your customers to talk. It's one thing if I tell a customer how great your company is. It's another thing if another customer tells your company how great they are. Right. So if you can take those customer stories in their own words, use them as a case study on the website, use some of their quotes or statistics within the course of an ebook, use some of that information in an email newsletter to be able to encourage people to come on, visit your site and learn more. Just take those stories and use them as many ways as possible. If you can invite them to participate in a webinar. Another thing too is a lot of companies are great about attending, speaking at trade shows. And if you can bring your customer with you to speak at an event, it's a fantastic way to share your news with people. Yeah. People love it.
So stories sell.
Stories
sell. How much strategy
sell.
goes into, you touched on this a little bit, Alison, but how much strategy goes into creating great content?
Ideally, a lot. Developing content like this it's not an inexpensive proposition. To develop something that really resonates and makes sense, you really do need to have somebody devote some time and energy to it. And if you're going to make that investment, it should be designed to serve a purpose. So pretty much every piece that we develop, we try to work closely with the customers beforehand and say, what's the intent of this? Who is going to be reading it? What would we like to get out of it? If you come into something with a goal in mind, then you at least have some chance at measuring whether or not it worked. that's not to say that sometimes things take on a life of their own and end up generating different results that you don't always predict, and that can be great too. But for the most part, it's great to do something just with a purpose as opposed to just winging it.
Random.
Yeah.
Random marketing.
Right.